You think you can just pour a drink on me and get away with it? Malcolm Johnson's voice rang out, louder than the chatter in the bar. His eyes, wide with disbelief, met the smug gaze of Officer Tom Bradley. The off-duty cop, a man used to the respect of his badge, leaned back, a smirk plastered on his face. He had been the king of this place, always in control, always the one with the last word. But today it was different. Today, Malcolm wouldn't back down. You're pathetic, Tom sneered, raising his glass again, ready to make his point. You're nothing but a fat joke. The drink splashed out of his cup, soaking Malcolm from head to toe. The bar fell silent for a split second. It was as if the world had stopped spinning, and all eyes were now on Malcolm. The people who had been laughing at Tom's joke, who had been enjoying the show, suddenly found themselves uncomfortable. They waited for Malcolm to shrink, to apologize, to walk away. But Malcolm didn't move. He didn't flinch. He simply stood there, the ice-cold drink dripping down his shirt, his mind racing but his body perfectly still. For years, he had been underestimated. He had heard it all, the jabs about his size, the rude comments, the way people saw him as less than. But in this moment, standing in front of a man who thought his badge made him untouchable, something inside Malcolm snapped. He wasn't about to let this go. The room, once buzzing with energy, now felt suffocating. Tom's smirk faltered as he waited for Malcolm to back down. But Malcolm wasn't the kind of man to let that happen anymore. He had spent too long hiding in the shadows, pretending he didn't care, pretending he was fine with being invisible. Not anymore. His hands, though steady, were clenched into fists at his sides. Without a word, he took a step forward, his eyes locked onto Tom's. The room seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for the explosion that would inevitably follow. What's wrong? Tom asked, a mocking tone in his voice. You gonna cry? Malcolm's lips parted, but his words weren't filled with anger. They were cold, calculated. You don't know who you're messing with. The bar remained frozen, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. Tom didn't understand. He thought Malcolm was just a joke, a guy who couldn't fight back. But the truth was, Malcolm had been fighting all his life. Not with his fists, but with his mind. And now, standing in front of the man who thought he could break him with a simple insult, Malcolm finally showed his true power. With one swift movement, Malcolm stepped closer, his fist connecting with Tom's jaw before the cop could even react. The impact was sudden, forceful, and shocking. Tom's world went black as he collapsed to the ground, stunned and speechless. The room went from dead silence to chaos in an instant. People gasped. Some stared in disbelief, others scrambled for their phones. But through it all, Malcolm remained calm. He didn't celebrate the victory. He didn't need to. For him, this was about something much bigger than just a fight. This was about respect. This was about showing the world that no one, not even a man with a badge, could treat him like he didn't matter. As the bartender rushed over to check on Tom, Malcolm straightened up, his eyes sweeping the room. He could feel the shift in the air, the way people started to look at him differently. And for the first time in a long time, Malcolm felt like he finally had the power. The power to stand up for himself. To make others see him for who he truly was. Not a joke, not an easy target, but a man who would no longer be silenced. Malcolm stood tall, his breath slow and steady, his eyes never leaving Tom's stunned face. The bar was still in chaos, people whispering, some looking around nervously, others openly staring. Tom, on the floor, was struggling to regain his composure, blinking hard as he tried to shake off the shock of what had just happened. But the damage was already done. The room had shifted. Malcolm's presence, once invisible, now commanded attention. It wasn't just the punch that had left a mark. It was the realization that Malcolm was no longer a man to be underestimated. As Tom slowly got to his feet, one hand gripping the edge of the bar for support, he looked around, his face flushed with embarrassment. You're not even worth my time, Malcolm said, his voice calm, cutting through the noise of the room. The words hung in the air, leaving a trail of silence in their wake. People shifted uncomfortably, exchanging glances. This wasn't the scenario they expected. They had thought they would watch a man crumble under the pressure of a public humiliation. But instead, they had witnessed something else, something far more powerful. Tom didn't say anything in return. He was speechless, his face pale, the smug confidence he once had slipping away like sand through his fingers. For the first time in his life, he felt small. "What's your problem, man?" one of Tom's friends asked, trying to break the tension. "His problem," Malcolm replied without hesitation, "is that he thinks he can treat people like garbage and get away with it." "Well, not today." With those words, Malcolm turned and walked toward the exit. The sound of his footsteps echoed through the bar as people watched him leave, some with a newfound respect, others still too stunned to process what had just happened. Tom stood there, his pride bruised, his mind racing. He had always been the one in control, the one who commanded respect. But now, he was the one who had been put in his place. The realization hit him hard. He wasn't untouchable. He wasn't above anyone. He was just a man. And for once, he had been forced to face the consequences of his actions. Outside, the cool night air hit Malcolm's face as he stepped onto the sidewalk. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the evening settle on his shoulders. He had done it. He had stood up for himself, for once not letting anyone walk over him. As he made his way down the street, a sense of calm washed over him. He knew that tonight would be a turning point. For so long, he had been living in the shadows, letting others dictate his worth. But not anymore. Tonight, he had taken his power back. It wasn't about the fight. It wasn't about the punch. It was about the message. He wasn't going to be invisible anymore. He wasn't going to let people define him by his size, by his job, or by his past. He was Malcolm Johnson, and he was worth more than anyone had ever given him credit for. Malcolm woke up the next morning feeling a strange sense of calm. He stretched his arms and rubbed his eyes, the events of the previous night still fresh in his mind. The punch had been a moment of pure instinct, but what followed, the way the room had shifted, was something he had never expected. He had always been the quiet guy, the one who stayed in the background, letting life pass him by. But now, something had changed. He wasn't the same person anymore. The city outside his small apartment window was waking up, the sun barely peeking over the skyline. He could hear the hum of traffic, the distant sounds of the world moving forward. But for Malcolm, the world felt different today. He wasn't just a bystander anymore. He wasn't just an invisible part of the crowd. He was a force. He stood up from his bed and walked over to the small kitchen, his mind still running through the events from last night. He had never imagined that standing up for himself could feel so liberating. For years, he had taken the insults, the jokes, the looks. He had convinced himself that it was easier to just stay quiet, to blend in, to let the world pass him by. But now, it seemed like the world was finally noticing him. His phone buzzed on the counter, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was a text from his best friend, Marcus. "Yo, Malcolm. You good? Heard about what happened last night. You okay?" Malcolm smiled, feeling a warmth spread through him. Marcus had always had his back, even when Malcolm didn't believe in himself. He quickly typed a response. "Yeah, man. I'm good. Better than good, actually." He paused for a moment, thinking about how to explain it. "I don't know. Last night, something changed." Marcus replied almost immediately. "Bro, you took control. That was some real power move." Malcolm leaned against the counter, his fingers tracing the edges of his coffee mug. He didn't know what had sparked this change in him. Maybe it was the years of being overlooked. Maybe it was the constant underestimation. But whatever it was, he knew he wasn't going to let it slip away. As he sipped his coffee, his mind started racing with possibilities. What if he could keep this momentum going? What if he could turn this newfound confidence into something bigger? Maybe it wasn't just about standing up for himself. Maybe it was about standing up for others, too. Maybe it was about showing the world that he wasn't just the guy in the background. Maybe he could make a difference. He glanced at his reflection in the kitchen window. The man staring back at him was someone he barely recognized. There was strength in his eyes, something he had never seen before. He wasn't just the guy who worked the late shifts at the mechanic shop. He wasn't just the guy who had always been the last to be chosen for anything. He was someone with a voice, with power, with the ability to change things. The possibilities felt endless. With a deep breath, Malcolm finished his coffee and grabbed his jacket. Today, he wasn't just going to fade into the background. Today, he was going to take control of his life. He was going to show the world who he really was. Malcolm arrived at work early the next morning, his mind still buzzing from the night before. The small garage was quiet, the hum of the air conditioning the only sound breaking the stillness. He took a deep breath, the familiar smell of oil and metal welcoming him as he stepped inside. His hands, though rough from years of working with tools, felt steady. He had made a decision. Today wasn't going to be like the others. As he looked around at the familiar workspace, Malcolm couldn't help but notice how much it had always felt like a cage. He had spent so many years hiding behind the engine bays, fixing cars, keeping his head down, never challenging anything. But now, things were different. He could feel it in his bones. The moment he stepped through the door, his boss, Mr. Richards, greeted him with a casual wave. "Morning, Malcolm. Got a long day ahead." Malcolm nodded, but his response was different this time. "Yeah, I know. Let's make it count." Mr. Richards raised an eyebrow. It wasn't like Malcolm to be this energetic, this eager. But the truth was, Malcolm was done with blending in. He was done letting life happen to him. He wanted to make something happen. As the day progressed, Malcolm worked with a new sense of purpose. Every turn of the wrench, every adjustment he made on the cars felt different. There was power in his actions now, not just because he was good at his job, but because he knew his worth. At lunch, he stepped outside for a quick break, and as he leaned against the side of the building, he thought about the next steps. He wasn't going to let his job define him anymore. He wasn't just a mechanic. He wasn't just the guy people overlooked. There was more to him than that, and he was ready to show it. As he finished his break, he walked back inside, where a customer was waiting. The man, dressed in a sharp suit, looked at Malcolm with a disinterested expression, as if expecting to be met with a subservient attitude. But Malcolm wasn't having it anymore. He stood tall, meeting the man's gaze. "How can I help you today?" The customer blinked, clearly thrown off by Malcolm's confidence. "I need an oil change," the man said, barely looking at him. "Sure thing," Malcolm replied, leading him over to one of the bays. The interaction was brief, but for Malcolm, it felt like a small victory. It wasn't just about the work. It was about the way he carried himself, the way he was finally demanding respect. By the time the day ended, Malcolm felt a sense of accomplishment he hadn't experienced before. The small moments, the subtle shifts in his behavior, they added up. He wasn't just going through the motions anymore. He was taking control of his life, one step at a time. As he walked to his car, he pulled out his phone to check the message from Marcus earlier. "Bro, you're changing. Keep it up." The words felt like a reminder, a confirmation that what he was doing was right. But Malcolm knew the journey wasn't over. It had just begun. Malcolm woke up the next day feeling the weight of his new resolve. It was a quiet morning, the kind where everything seemed still, as if the world was waiting for him to take the next step. He stood in front of the mirror, looking at his reflection with a new sense of clarity. It wasn't just about fixing cars anymore. It was about fixing himself. He had made the decision to stop being invisible. The day ahead didn't feel like a routine anymore. It felt like an opportunity, a chance to put everything he had been feeling into action. As he made his way to the garage, he noticed a shift in the way people looked at him. The familiar faces that once barely acknowledged his presence now greeted him with a subtle respect. Even Mr. Richards, his boss, gave him an approving nod when he arrived. "Morning, Malcolm. You're early," Mr. Richards said, his tone a little more open than usual. Malcolm simply nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "I'm ready for the day," he said, his voice steady. As the day unfolded, Malcolm continued to surprise himself. He tackled each task with precision, focusing on the details, and for the first time, he felt truly seen for his skill. A few hours into the shift, a customer arrived with a vintage car, a model Malcolm had always admired. The car was in rough shape, but Malcolm didn't hesitate. He dove in, his hands working with confidence, every movement intentional. He could feel the change in the air, the way his movements had purpose now, the way his actions spoke louder than any words ever could. As the car's engine started humming again, smooth and steady, the customer looked up from his phone, clearly impressed. "You did good work," he said, his voice a little softer, almost respectful. Malcolm gave him a simple nod, but inside, he felt a rush of pride. It wasn't just about fixing the car. It was about being recognized for his talent. As the sun started to set, Malcolm finished his shift and stepped outside, the cool evening air wrapping around him. He didn't rush to his car like he used to. Instead, he took a moment to breathe, looking up at the sky. It was a quiet moment, but for Malcolm, it was a monumental one. He had made the choice to step into the world, to take control of his narrative. He wasn't just a man who worked on engines. He was a man who had discovered his own strength, his own voice. Walking home, he couldn't help but think about the future. The world had suddenly opened up to him in a way it never had before. Every step he took felt lighter, like he was finally walking on his own terms. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and he pulled it out to see a message from Marcus. "You've been different lately. I can feel it. Keep doing what you're doing." Malcolm smiled as he read the words. For the first time in his life, he felt like he was truly living, not just existing. He knew the journey wasn't over, but it was a start. And for him, that was enough. Malcolm woke up the next morning with a sense of determination that felt different from anything he had experienced before. The days of walking through life unnoticed, of letting others dictate his worth, were behind him. He knew today was going to be another step forward, but he wasn't sure exactly what that would look like. As he made his way to the garage, the same familiar streets, the same familiar routine, felt different now. His head was held high, and with each step, he could feel the change. The world felt just a little bit more within his reach. He walked into the garage, greeted Mr. Richards with a nod, and got straight to work. But today, it wasn't the same. The work felt different. It wasn't just about fixing cars. It was about proving to himself that he was capable of more. He had spent too long in the shadows, too long letting the world tell him he didn't matter. But now, he knew he had a place here. He had value, and it wasn't something anyone could take away. By mid-morning, a customer came in with a classic car that had been giving them trouble. It wasn't the kind of job that would get him a ton of praise, but Malcolm didn't mind. This time, it wasn't about the accolades. It was about the satisfaction of knowing he could fix anything that came his way. He worked with precision, his hands moving with skill and confidence, every turn of the wrench and every adjustment done with purpose. The car's engine roared to life, smoother than it had in years, and the customer looked up, impressed. "Good work," the man said, his voice laced with respect. "I didn't expect it to sound this good." Malcolm simply nodded. It was the kind of moment that used to pass unnoticed, but now, it felt like a small victory. As the day went on, Malcolm couldn't help but notice how the energy around him had shifted. It wasn't just the work he was doing. It was how people were starting to view him. Mr. Richards, for the first time, gave him a genuine compliment. "You're making a real difference here," he said, his tone softer than usual. Malcolm didn't respond immediately. He didn't need to. The recognition was there. It was a moment he had been waiting for, but never expected to come so soon. He had always been the quiet guy, the one who did the work without fuss, who stayed out of the spotlight. But now he wasn't just the guy who fixed cars. He was the guy who had found his voice. As the shift ended and Malcolm walked home, he felt a sense of calm wash over him. He wasn't rushing anymore, no longer trying to escape the life he had been living. He was living it now, fully and without apologies. The streets he walked down felt different, and for the first time in a long time, he realized he was no longer trying to blend into the background. He was a part of this world, and he wasn't going anywhere. When he got home, he took a moment to look at the city through his window. There was a sense of peace in the air, a quiet confidence that had settled inside him. He had made it this far, and there was no going back. His journey was just beginning, and he was ready for whatever came next. The morning light filtered through the blinds, casting a soft glow across the room. Malcolm sat at the small table in his apartment, a mug of coffee in his hands, his mind racing. The past few weeks had been a blur, a whirlwind of small victories and quiet moments of realization. He had changed. He had stepped into his own, and now, he was starting to see the world differently. It wasn't just about work anymore. It wasn't just about the cars he fixed or the hours he put in at the garage. It was about the way he was starting to show up in his own life. The confidence he had gained wasn't just a feeling, it was real. It was something that radiated from him now, and people were starting to notice. At work, things had shifted. The small talk, the casual dismissals, had all but disappeared. Instead, he was treated with a new level of respect. It was subtle at first, but it grew with each passing day. Mr. Richards no longer just gave him tasks. He trusted him with responsibility. His co-workers, who once overlooked him, now sought his advice, appreciated his input. The change had been gradual, but it was unmistakable. Malcolm had earned his place, and he knew it. As he sat in his apartment, reflecting on it all, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Marcus. "Heard you're making moves. Proud of you, man. Keep going." Malcolm smiled at the words, a feeling of warmth spreading through him. He had always been the quiet one, the one who kept his head down. But now, He was the one making things happen. He was the one stepping up, not waiting for someone to hand him his moment. His phone buzzed again, this time with a notification about a community event happening downtown. It was a charity car show, something that caught his attention immediately. He had always been passionate about cars, but it wasn't just the show that interested him. It was the opportunity to be seen, to show people who he was, to be a part of something bigger than himself. Without a second thought, he grabbed his jacket and headed out the door. The drive downtown was quick, the city streets familiar, but today they felt different. Today, they felt like part of his journey. When he arrived at the event, the parking lot was already filling up with classic cars, engines revving, and people chatting excitedly. It was everything he had expected, but there was a sense of nervous energy inside him. This was a bigger crowd than he was used to. He wasn't just a mechanic here. He was a participant, a player in this world. But as he walked toward the registration table, he felt that familiar calm wash over him. He had done the work. He had put in the hours. He was ready. As he filled out the form to enter his car into the show, a voice called out to him. "Hey, you're Malcolm, right?" He turned to see one of his old co-workers from the garage, Dave, walking toward him with a grin. "Didn't expect to see you here," Dave said, offering a handshake. "It's good to see you out and about." Malcolm shook his hand firmly, a sense of pride swelling inside him. "Yeah, I've been making some changes," he replied, his voice steady. Dave raised an eyebrow. "I can see that. You look different." Malcolm chuckled. "It's the same me, just showing up more." As the day went on, Malcolm found himself connecting with people he would have never imagined talking to before. He wasn't just blending into the background anymore. He was part of the conversation. He was present. And for the first time in his life, he realized that he didn't have to hide. He didn't have to shrink. The world was big enough for him to take up space, and he was going to do just that. Malcolm woke up to the sound of his phone buzzing. It was still early, but his mind was already racing with thoughts of what the day might bring. He had grown used to the calm mornings, the ones where he could ease into the day. But today, there was a different energy in the air. Today, he had an appointment that could change everything. He had been thinking about it for days. A business meeting with a local car enthusiast who was interested in partnering with him to open his own auto shop. It wasn't just a business opportunity. It was a chance to prove to himself that he could do more than just work for someone else. He had worked in the garage long enough to know what it took to succeed, but now he was ready to take the leap into owning his own business. After a quick shower and a cup of coffee, Malcolm dressed in a button-up shirt and slacks. He had never been one for formal wear, but today felt different. Today, he was going to make an impression. As he made his way to the meeting, his nerves began to settle. He had done the work, built the skills, and earned the respect. Now it was time to put everything into action. When he arrived at the office, the man he was meeting, Mike, was already waiting for him. Mike was older, his graying hair and stern expression giving off the air of someone who had seen it all. But as Malcolm sat down across from him, he could sense the curiosity in Mike's eyes. This wasn't just a regular meeting. It was a chance for Malcolm to step into a new role, one that would require everything he had learned in the past few weeks. They exchanged pleasantries, but Malcolm was focused. He wasn't going to let the moment slip away. "I've been working in this industry for years," Malcolm said, his voice steady. "I've learned a lot along the way, and I know what it takes to build a successful shop. I know the customers, the cars, and the kind of service they expect." Mike leaned forward, his eyes narrowing slightly. "And why do you want to do this on your own?" he asked. "What's the reason you think you're ready to run your own business?" Malcolm thought about it for a moment. This wasn't just about money or status. It was about proving to himself that he could build something from the ground up. "Because I know what it feels like to be overlooked," he said. "I've spent my whole life working hard, never getting the recognition I deserve. But I've realized something. No one is going to hand me anything. I have to take it. I want to create something that reflects who I am and the work I've put in." There was a long pause, and for a moment, Malcolm thought he might have said too much. But Mike's face softened. "I respect that," Mike said. "It's not easy to put yourself out there like that. But you've got the right mindset. I think you've got what it takes to make it work." The relief that washed over Malcolm was almost overwhelming. He hadn't realized how much he had been holding his breath until now. The validation he had sought for so long was finally coming his way, and it was all because he had taken the leap. As they discussed the details of the partnership, Malcolm couldn't help but smile. This wasn't just a business deal. It was a new chapter in his life, one that was all his own. When he left the office, he felt lighter than he had in years. The weight of doubt that had always hovered over him had been lifted, and he could see the path ahead more clearly than ever. It wasn't going to be easy, but for the first time, Malcolm felt like he was ready to face whatever came next. Malcolm woke up the next morning with a sense of clarity he had never felt before. The meeting with Mike had confirmed something for him. He was ready. He had spent so many years doubting himself, letting others define who he was. But now he knew that the power was in his hands. As he sipped his coffee, the weight of the decision he had made the day before settled in. He was about to take a huge leap, but for the first time, he felt certain it was the right one. The idea of starting his own shop wasn't just a dream anymore. It was a reality. His phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a message from Marcus. "So, what's the plan now? Are we going for it?" Malcolm smiled at the message. He had always kept his ambitions close to his chest, but now, he felt ready to share it with the world. He quickly typed back, "Yeah, we're doing this. It's time." The words felt solid, like a promise he had made to himself. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of paperwork, planning, and phone calls. Malcolm had to balance his day job at the garage while meeting with potential investors, organizing the logistics for the new shop, and securing the right location. It was exhausting, but every night, as he lay in bed, he couldn't help but smile. This was his future unfolding in front of him. Slowly but surely, everything started to come together. He found a small building in an up-and-coming part of town, one that had the potential to attract the kind of customers he wanted, people who valued quality work and genuine service. It wasn't much at first, just a few rooms and a small lot for cars, but to Malcolm, it felt like a gold mine. The next step was hiring a team. He knew that in order to succeed, he couldn't do it alone. He needed a crew that shared his vision, his drive. He reached out to a few people he trusted, people who had worked with him before, and they were all eager to join him on this new venture. The idea of building something from the ground up with people who had his back was one of the most exciting parts of this whole process. The day they officially opened the shop was a blur. There were nerves, excitement, and a little bit of fear, but mostly there was pride. As the first customers walked in, Malcolm's heart swelled. This was it. This was his moment. And the thing was, he had earned it. The first few months were tough. There were challenges that came with owning a business, unexpected expenses, long hours, and the constant pressure to make sure everything ran smoothly. But Malcolm didn't shy away from it. He took it all in stride, knowing that every obstacle was just another step toward success. The team worked well together, and the customers they attracted were loyal. Word of mouth spread, and slowly, the shop began to build a reputation for being the place to go for honest, reliable service. Malcolm's confidence grew with each passing day. He wasn't the same man he had been when he started this journey. He was stronger, more self-assured, and more determined than ever to make this business a success. One evening, as he locked up for the night, he took a moment to look around the shop. The work wasn't done, but it was starting to feel real. He had built something from nothing, and that was a feeling he would never take for granted. Malcolm stood outside the shop, his hands shoved in his pockets as he looked out over the busy street. The sun was beginning to set, casting an orange glow over the city, and for a moment, he allowed himself to just breathe. It had been a long road, filled with countless hours of hard work and challenges, but here he was, standing in front of something he had built with his own hands. The shop was doing well now, the steady stream of customers coming in and out a testament to the effort he and his team had put in. His team, was more than just co-workers. They were the ones who had believed in him from the beginning, who had helped him turn an idea into reality. Without them, he knew the shop wouldn't have thrived like it had. Things were looking good. The business was stable, the customers were loyal, and his reputation in the community had started to grow. But as Malcolm stood there, he knew this wasn't the end of his journey. He had made it this far, but there was still so much more to accomplish. There were still dreams to chase, obstacles to overcome. As the days passed, the shop became a well-known fixture in the area. Malcolm had earned respect not only for his work, but for his unwavering dedication to doing things the right way. He was no longer the quiet guy in the background. He was a business owner, a leader, and someone others looked up to. One afternoon, a man walked into the shop, a car enthusiast by the look of him, with a smile that seemed to carry an unspoken challenge. "I've heard a lot about your shop," the man said, eyeing the vehicles in the garage. "I've been in the business for years, but I've never seen a place run quite like this. I'm interested in a partnership. What do you think?" Malcolm's heart skipped a beat. A partnership? He had never considered it, but the idea of expanding, of growing his business even further, ignited something inside him. He was ready for the challenge. He had already proven to himself that he could build something from the ground up. The thought of taking it to the next level, of working with someone who shared his passion, was exhilarating. As they sat down and discussed the potential partnership, Malcolm listened carefully, weighing his options. He had learned over the past few months to trust his instincts, to make decisions with confidence. This felt right. He was ready for it. Over the next few weeks, the details of the partnership began to take shape. The process wasn't without its challenges, but Malcolm had learned how to handle the pressure. The meetings, the negotiations, the adjustments, they were all part of the game now. And as he moved forward, he realized that the person who had once feared stepping into the spotlight had now become someone who thrived in it. The shop was no longer just his dream. It was a testament to everything he had overcome. As the partnership solidified, Malcolm took a moment to reflect. The man who had once worked in the shadows, the man who had doubted his worth, was now a business owner with a vision for the future. The road ahead was still uncertain, but Malcolm knew one thing for sure. He was ready to face whatever came next. He had built this life, and now, he was going to take it further than he had ever imagined. Malcolm stood in the middle of his shop, taking a deep breath as he looked around at the space he had built. The walls, once bare and cold, were now adorned with photos of satisfied customers and a few awards from the community. The floor was clean, the cars were neatly lined up, and the tools were all in place. It was hard to believe that just a year ago, this place had only been a dream. Now it was thriving. But as much as he had accomplished, he knew this was just the beginning. The partnership he had entered into had given him new opportunities, but it also came with new challenges. There were decisions to be made, responsibilities to take on, and a whole new level of pressure. It was a lot to manage, but Malcolm had never been one to shy away from hard work. He had learned over time that the road to success was rarely a straight line, and that each setback was simply another lesson on the path forward. As the months passed, the shop continued to grow. The customers kept coming, the word of mouth spread, and Malcolm's reputation as a reliable, honest businessman became more solid. He was no longer just the mechanic in the back corner. He was the owner, the leader, and he was beginning to realize the impact he could have on his community. He started mentoring a few of the younger mechanics, offering them advice and teaching them the same lessons he had learned over the years. It was a role he had never imagined for himself, but one that felt natural. He remembered what it had felt like when someone had given him a chance, when someone had believed in him. Now, he was in a position to do the same for others. One afternoon, as he sat in his office, reviewing financials and planning the next steps for the business, his phone rang. It was Marcus. "Hey, man, you got a minute?" Marcus asked, his voice filled with excitement. "Of course. What's up?" "I've been thinking," Marcus began. "You've built something incredible here. But have you ever thought about expanding? I mean, you've got the skills, the reputation. Why not take it further? More locations? Bigger reach?" Malcolm sat back in his chair, the idea settling into his mind. He had always focused on making this one location a success, but Marcus was right. If he could replicate what he had done here, if he could offer the same level of service and build that same reputation in other parts of the city, the possibilities were endless. It was a big step, a risk, but it was also exactly the kind of challenge Malcolm had been craving. He had come so far, and the idea of taking the business to the next level sparked something in him. "I think it's time," Malcolm said, his voice steady with conviction. "I think we're ready for that next chapter." Over the next few months, Malcolm and Marcus worked tirelessly, researching locations, securing funding, and developing a plan to expand the business. The stress was immense, but so was the excitement. Every day, they made progress. Every day, they moved closer to their goal. As the grand opening of the second location approached, Malcolm felt a sense of pride and anticipation. He had taken the leap. He had gone from being the guy in the back of the garage to being a successful business owner with plans for the future. The path ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, Malcolm felt like he had everything he needed to succeed: confidence, drive, and the belief that he could make anything happen if he worked hard enough. Malcolm sat in his new office, staring out of the window as the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the street. The second location was officially up and running, and the team had settled in quickly, adapting to the new space with ease. It wasn't just another shop. It was a symbol of how far he had come. He had worked so hard to get here, putting in hours of effort and facing challenges that had once seemed insurmountable. Yet here he was, managing two successful locations, leading a team of people who looked to him for direction. It was a feeling Malcolm had never truly allowed himself to believe he could achieve. The thought of expansion had always seemed like a distant dream, something other people accomplished, not someone like him. But now, with both locations thriving, he realized that his potential was far greater than he had imagined. As he sat there, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Marcus. "You good? The shop's busy. Just wanted to check in." Malcolm smiled, tapping out a quick response. "Yeah, all good. Just taking a moment to reflect. We've come a long way, man." He leaned back in his chair, letting the moment sink in. The hustle had been relentless, but it had paid off. He wasn't just running a business. He was building a legacy, and the people around him were a part of it. He thought about the team, how far they had come from when they first started working together. Everyone had their own role, their own strengths, but together, they were stronger than they could ever be apart. They were more than co-workers now. They were partners in this journey. The phone buzzed again, this time with a call from Mike, the man he had met months ago about the partnership. "Hey, Malcolm," Mike said when he picked up. "I've been hearing great things. I wanted to talk about the future, your plans for the next year, maybe even further." Malcolm's mind raced as Mike spoke. Plans for the future. The idea felt so surreal. Not just expanding the business, but possibly taking it beyond the city. The thought was thrilling and intimidating all at once. He hadn't thought that far ahead yet, but now that it was on the table, he could see it. "I'm listening," Malcolm said, his voice calm, but with a sense of determination. "I've been thinking," Mike continued. "You've got the right formula here. The way you've built this up, it's impressive. Have you considered franchising? I think this model could work in other cities." Malcolm was quiet for a moment, letting the idea sink in. Franchising. The word felt big, like something far beyond what he had envisioned. But Mike's words struck a chord. He had always dreamed of growth, of making his mark on the world, but the reality of franchising was both daunting and exciting. "It's something to think about," Malcolm said finally. "I've always believed in the quality of what we do here, but expanding like that, I don't know. It's big." Mike laughed, a light chuckle. "It is big, but you've proven you can do big things. You've already built something from nothing, Malcolm. This is just the next step." The conversation continued, filled with ideas and possibilities, and as it came to an end, Malcolm felt a spark inside him. It was the spark of possibility, of understanding that the world was opening up to him in ways he had never imagined. He had come so far, but the road ahead was wide open, filled with opportunities he had only dreamed of. As he hung up the phone, Malcolm stood up, looking around the office one last time before he left for the day. This was just the beginning. He was ready to take on whatever came next. The next chapter was his to write. Malcolm sat back in his office chair, staring at the blueprint on his desk. The shop was expanding, the second location was flourishing, and now the possibility of franchising was within reach. He had always dreamed of making a name for himself, of building something that lasted. But even with all the success he had achieved so far, it felt like the real challenge was just beginning. The decision to take the next step, to open more shops and possibly reach more cities, weighed on him. It wasn't just about making more money or growing bigger. It was about sustaining what he had built and ensuring that the quality he had worked so hard to establish would remain intact. The pressure was immense, but he knew he couldn't shy away from it. He had taken risks before, and they had paid off. This time, it would be no different. As he reviewed the plans, his phone buzzed again, pulling him out of his thoughts. It was Marcus. "Malcolm, we need to talk. It's about the expansion." Malcolm picked up immediately. "What's going on?" "I've been looking at the numbers, and I think we need to slow down for a bit. We've got a great foundation, but opening another location too soon could stretch us thin." Malcolm paused for a moment, processing what Marcus had said. He had always trusted Marcus's judgment, but this was the first time that someone had suggested slowing down when everything was moving so fast. "I've been thinking about it, too," Malcolm said. "But we're already ahead of schedule. I don't want to miss this opportunity." It's now or never. Marcus's voice softened. I get it. I do. But what's the point of growing if we're going to sacrifice what makes us special? We've built something good here, something solid. I just don't want to risk losing that by rushing. Malcolm leaned back in his chair, thinking carefully. The pressure to expand quickly was overwhelming, but Marcus was right. It wasn't just about growth. It was about maintaining the integrity of what they had created. The last thing he wanted was to compromise the quality that had gotten them this far. You're right, Malcolm finally said. We've worked too hard to get here. To let it fall apart because of speed. Let's take it one step at a time. After that conversation, Malcolm spent the next few weeks refining his plans. He met with his team, consulted with experts, and took a deeper look at the logistics of expansion. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that there was no need to rush. His dream was within reach, but he didn't have to compromise his values to achieve it. He wasn't in a race. This was about building something that would last, something that would stand the test of time. As the months went by, the shop continued to grow steadily. Malcolm's reputation as a business owner who valued quality over quantity spread throughout the city. Customers returned because they trusted him, because they knew that when they came to his shop, they were getting more than just a service. They were getting someone who cared. And that meant everything. The day Malcolm decided to expand again, he did so on his own terms. He found a location that fit the vision he had in mind, and he brought in the right people. People who understood the importance of keeping things personal, keeping things real. It wasn't about the size of the business. It was about staying true to what made it successful in the first place. As the second new location opened, Malcolm stood outside, looking at the sign with pride. This wasn't just the result of hard work. It was the result of learning from every mistake, from every challenge, and using those lessons to build something meaningful. He wasn't just a businessman. He was a man who had dared to dream and had built something real. And with each new step, he knew that he was only just getting started.